Of reconciliation. For 27 years, this TV program has aired a variety of issues related to peace, social justice, the environment, and nonviolent social change. We especially provide opportunities for the public to hear information and viewpoints that are rarely heard on mainstream media. This month, we will connect the dots between three serious issues: nuclear weapons, nuclear power, and the climate crisis, and we'll explore how human beings deal with or avoid dealing with these serious issues. It's hard to hear about these, so we do recognize how threatening it can feel to confront them, and we will practice compassion as we proceed. I'm happy to welcome Bernie Meyer as our guest for this hour. He's a longtime friend and one of our favorite guests on this program. Bernie deals with substantive issues in fresh ways and with wisdom and profound humanity. The specific context for this program is that Bernie had deliberately trespassed onto the Trident base, Trident nuclear submarine base in Kitsap County, Washington. He did this act of civil resistance in order to nonviolently express his profound concern about nuclear weapons. The federal prosecutor dropped the charges just a week before his trial, which had been scheduled for federal court in December 2013. Bernie prepared powerful statements to convey during the trial and in sentencing. The information that Bernie had, the perspectives, provide some context and some of the substance for this TV program that you're watching now. We want to thank Bernie and his wisdom and his good heart for being a guest on this program.
Thank you, Glenn.
I'm glad to have you here. Thanks. Let's start by helping the viewers understand something about your background, especially the active nonviolent work you've done since the late 60s and beyond. Would you summarize your background here?
Well, I was primed for activism when I studied for the Catholic priesthood and studied what Jesus did that led to his crucifixion. And at that time in Cleveland, Ohio, the race situation was at a peak, and Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement was at a peak, and the war in Vietnam was generating. So I ended up, after a 9-month special program of hitting the streets and hitting the books to deal with these issues, the Vietnam War, the race situation, and poverty. And I ended up doing a nonviolent civil disobedience action with the Dow Chemical company in Washington, D.C. in 1969. And from that time on, I've been on a path. Mm-hmm. I'm in a groove.
You're from Cleveland, but you lived elsewhere. You You meant you were in Colorado for a bit, and tell us about.
I moved to Colorado in 1973 to work on social justice and peace issues. And at that time, I became acquainted with Rocky Flats, was where the triggers for nuclear weapons were developed. So that started me learning about nuclear weapons and resisting nuclear weapons. I was there for 5 years and starting helping people there, working with people there to say we need to stop what we're doing there at Rocky Flats. And then I moved to Washington State in 1978, and that was when the community was starting to resist a new base for the Trident submarine.
Right.
And I tagged along with that and become more and more active over the years.
Right, yeah. The Ground Zero Center for Nonviolent Action was new in right about the time that you moved here, so you've been at it from the outset.
Right.
In the work that you've done, you've always acted from a clear ethical standpoint, a moral, solid grounding, and nonviolently. Can you tell us something about how you practice nonviolence in a principled way?
Well, I saw Jesus do nonviolence with his disciples picking the grains on the Sabbath to feed themselves, and then he threw the money changers out of the temple, and so that got me into it because I saw people in Cleveland trying nonviolence too at that time while I was in the seminary, and I wasn't trained for it, but I was trained to live by principle, to live by the Sermon on the Mount, to live by the church teaching on social justice. And then I found out about Gandhi, and so I found a couple of mentors, and we got into it. We broke the law, we challenged the church, and we challenged the government.
Right. Well, and you were arrested at the Dow Chemical action back in
1969.
And so, I mean, you've been staking out this commitment in a real personal way. Then you mentioned Mohandas Gandhi, the Mahatma. You've been studying Gandhi's ethics, his teachings, his practice for a number of years now. And tell us about that, and then the work you've done more physically.
Well, the first stage was in '69. It appealed to me that Gandhi tried to live by the truth with love. And he saw everybody having truth, every person, no distinction, has truth. Even the worst of persons has some truth. But the deepest truth is why we're here. And that appealed to me. And then about 12 years ago, 2002, I was asked to portray Gandhi. So the second stage is going to the full bloom of Gandhi and trying to understand what it is, and then conveying that by portraying him, not just acting, but continuing my civil disobedience path,
Right.
citizen intervention path.
Right. So you've done portrayals in character when you would wear Gandhi's kind of clothing, and you would, because you've studied it so much that you've really internalized the message, the ethics, the approach, and then you've been able to take that message not only different places around here, but also to India. They keep inviting you back to India, and they call you the American Gandhi, which is amazing.
It's very different to portray Gandhi in India than here. Here they see me as an American acting. In India, they think I am doing Gandhi, and they treat me like Gandhi in India. So it's a real different feeling.
Yeah. What have you learned? And they keep inviting you back to speak not only to media, but university groups and an annual,
That's right.
a big annual youth
Many.
peace conference, all kinds of
Right,
things. You're
right.
pretty prominent there. What have you learned from your study of Gandhi and your direct participation in these portrayals and other actions?
Well, Gandhi was not simply, but doing nonviolence by civil disobedience and challenging the British government or other entities. He had a comprehensive program, a holistic program. Everything from how he cooked food and live in the city without distinction of people, living with the untouchables, which was no in a big way. It still is in many places. So his nonviolence began with the spinning wheel and right treatment of people, and goes to the big questions.
Yeah, local decentralized economy at the village level, appropriate technology, the spinning wheel.
Those kinds of things.
Things that can empower people and improve public health and the day-to-day living, not just the hardcore politics of it.
So that's a program around external things, but what's hard for us Americans to understand, since we live more on a material level, is the deep inside level, the spiritual, which I was prepared for by my spirituality that I learned over the years before I got into social action.
Well, I know in 2007 you went to Scotland and England and you walked from Faslane, Scotland, where the Trident submarine base in the United Kingdom is based, to London, and along the way you also learned more about nuclear power and the radiation that was polluting, the nuclear radiation that was polluting the coastline of Ireland and England. Tell us about that experience.
That was,
and you did that in character as Gandhi.
I did that as Gandhi because I thought there'd be more consciousness about Gandhi in India, and if I was dressed as Gandhi and conveying the message as Gandhi, they'd have a better appreciation. But I learned that no, only the Indians in the United Kingdom at least know something about Gandhi. But that walk with a group of people toward a nuclear-free world brought me along the way in terms of nuclear radiation, in terms of nuclear power. Walking along the coast to Sellafield on the English coast of the Irish Sea, I found out how polluted the Irish Sea is with radiation. I learned a lot. I just thought the big problem with nuclear power is what to do with the waste. How do you contain that so that it doesn't hurt the environment? But now I see the whole 9 yards of the production of nuclear power and the way it's made the Irish Sea, until at least Fukushima, the most radiated body of water in the world. The Irish Sea is radiated. The whole coastline, not just of the UK, but of Ireland, is radiated, and the effects on people by the shores is dramatic.
Okay, yeah. Now let's bring things up to the closer time and the closer geography. In Kitsap County, we mentioned, is where the Trident nuclear submarine base is in the United States. Right next to the base is the Ground Zero Center for Nonviolent Action, and I've been active in that also, going back to the beginning time.
For 36 years, 37 years.
And they've been resisting nuclear weapons in principled nonviolent ways since '78. Currently, every year they do 3 big actions a year. One in January at the Martin Luther King holiday, one in May around Mother's Day weekend, and one in August around the time of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. On May 2nd of 2013, your mother died back in Cleveland, and you went back for that, and 9 days later, on May 11, you were out here at the Trident base. And tell us what you did to honor your mother just 9 days after her passing.
Mom was a very loving person, a very nurturing person, and her whole life was around raising her children and love for all children. So what better way could I honor her than to say, let's make a strong statement about the killing of children that is going on right now, and has been going on, and will be going on until we change what we're doing. And so I joined the Mother's Day action on May 11th by walking on the base, crossing the blue line which separates the county property from the federal property, carrying a flag of peace, and reading Julia Ward Howe's statement starting the first Mother's Day, so that we won't send our children to kill the children of other women.
Yeah.
And that's what I was doing, and I had a whole rationale. I needed to say this not just to the base, but to the government and to the public. We have to wake up.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that Mother's Day was a day for peace to be led by women, just as you said. And so you were recapturing that and honoring your own mother. We have a photo here of you at the beginning of the action, and people can see that you're carrying this colorful flag, and they can see that you're reading something from a sheet of paper, and that's Julia Ward Howe's Mother's Day proclamation. We have a photo here of just a few minutes later. The police were very prompt in taking you down, and here you are on the ground, and the police are on you.
This was a very unusual response to somebody walking across that blue line. They read a statement which in fact said, "Go back," and I thought, I'm not going back. I got what I wanted to say. I wanted to warn people about what we're doing. The flames are burning and nobody's seeing them. And they took me to the ground when I made a move toward the entrance to the base.
Now, there's a long tradition going back to about the beginning of your activism when people would take a nonviolent action and subject themselves to arrest and try to use the court process as a way to make their statement and explain what this powerful action was about. And sometimes people want to use a necessity defense, the defense that says, well, I broke this law, this small law, because I'm trying to uphold a higher law, either like international law or a higher God's law or something to protect all of humanity or protect the environment. Often those higher law statements, necessity defenses, raising international law, are not allowed in court. Tell us about the strategy of what happens commonly and how you see things.
Well, there are several defenses when you risk arrest doing a citizen's intervention like this. Some people call it civil disobedience, but 2 years ago I used international humanitarian law, and the court for that 2 years ago did not allow me to even use international humanitarian law to justify what I did. Sometimes the court will let you say what's on your mind and you can go into it in detail. Sometimes they just cut you off totally. That happened to me in '69 when we couldn't mention the word Vietnam and the Vietnam War. We couldn't mention napalm. We couldn't mention, what do you call it, 2,4-D, Agent Orange and so on. You couldn't mention any of the reasons why you were doing what you did.
Even though you had taken your action at Dow Chemical because they make napalm, and we use in Vietnam, and the court wouldn't even allow you to say that.
Wouldn't let you mention it. So I copped a plea there. I pleaded no contest, and I went to prison for that. In this case, I was trying to say the flames are invisible, nobody's looking at them, and they're killing people now. The bombs could go off in the future, and just depending on how many bombs could destroy the earth or make a big destruction of many places.
And the radiation is persistent.
But the radiation
even if
is
the bombs
happening
don't get launched,
to it now.
even if they don't launch.
Yes.
As a result of the Mother's Day action in 2013, you were scheduled for a federal trial on December 16 of 2013, and you wanted to attend your trial dressed as Gandhi and make a clear witness. Tell us why you wanted to dress as Gandhi for that federal trial.
How do you give a message graphically, effectively, and have it come across? So I played with the idea, as somebody else's suggestion actually, of going to court. And the day before Gandhi died, and I portrayed this, I have a 6-scene act for Gandhi. In the last scene, the day before he died, Margaret Burke White of Life magazine asked him what he would do with the atom bomb. And he said, in effect, I didn't move a muscle when I heard Hiroshima was bombed with the atom bomb, but I said, unless humanity adopts nonviolence, it will be suicide for mankind. And I believe that. I believe that that is quite possible. And not only with the atom or nuclear bombs, but with the very existence of nuclear weapons and nuclear power, and the process from taking it out of the earth to what to do with it at the end of the waste period, you know. So it's lethal, and people are ignorant of it.
So you wrote up some testimony that you wanted to be able to provide during the trial, and we'll get into some of the substance in a few minutes. Well, so the sense of providing this testimony was for what purpose? To try to convey the sense?
I wrote it up to get my own thoughts in order, and I wanted it to get as much out of my testimony as possible, and I had a lawyer. I usually defend myself in these cases, but this time I had a lawyer. I didn't have time after coming back from India. And so the lawyer says, I'll see how much we can get out. So he could use that testimony, that statement, and try to draw me out and see how far the court would let me go. The prosecutor told him right away, I'm not going to allow it, because that's a waste of time. That's a Navy prosecutor. But we didn't get to that far. But I wrote it out. But I have it now, and I'm trying to get the word out.
Right.
And this is a good help here.
Yes. Well, that's the idea, is that the court wouldn't allow, well, the court withdrew the charges. The prosecutor didn't want to go to trial with you. But we're conveying the substance of this through this program, this TV program, which will appear on the internet besides on TCTV. And you are already posted your material on the website for Ground Zero at www.gzcenter.org.
Right.
So we encourage people to read that. They also have the photos that I showed a moment ago. You at the outset of the action, and then you on the ground with the police on you. So you've been protesting nuclear weapons for decades. Tell us some more about what's the substance of what you were trying to convey in your statement.
There's so much. The substance entails examining what is happening now and contrasting the effects of radiation from nuclear power and nuclear weapons without even the use of nuclear weapons. And of course, if nuclear weapons get used in a major war or in a war like between India and Pakistan, it's going to be instant for a heck of a lot of people, and slowly for other people, just like Nagasaki and Hiroshima.
So tell us about this concept of nuclearism. You've done a lot of reading from a number of people, including Robert J. Lifton, who's written some amazingly good things about nuclear weapons. I don't mean good like positive, I mean insightful.
It's good analysis.
It talks about nuclearism. Tell us about that approach.
Robert J. Lifton's a psychiatrist who started in the 1950s going into these situations of very serious human situations. And his method is interviewing people to draw them out into what moved their minds to do what they did, whether it was victimizing people or being a victim or somewhere in between. And his drawing people out enables him to develop an understanding of the effects. And nuclearism is one of the effects. And in his book, The Broken Connection, which goes through development from childhood to adulthood and ends up with several chapters on the thinking of people in regards to nuclear weapons. Nuclearism applies to those persons who make their personal mindset, their personal identity identified with nukes. They're empowered. When President Truman, who had just become president before that the death of FDR, was with the Soviet leader and with the English leader having a conference.
Yes,
and when
Stalin and Churchill.
Yeah.
Right.
When he heard that the first nuclear atom bomb was blown off in the desert in Trinity, he felt empowered. And so he became identified at that point, and he went from a person that was kind of nervous and withdrawn to a person that was telling Stalin and so forth what's going to happen. So he's empowered. But that was a kind of a short-lasting nuclearism application. Edward Teller, pardon me, who became the father of the nuclear bomb, had a more powerful identification with the bomb.
Yeah.
And Lifton shows his statements explaining it. So it has many nuances to it.
Yeah, since you mentioned Edward Teller, I've got a quotation that you had provided when we were preparing for the program, and you talk about the absurdity, and this is in your statement to the court.
Yeah.
Talk about the absurdity of the denial about the problem, and your quotation from Edward Teller says, "Radiation from test fallout is very small. Its effect on human beings is so little that if it exists at all, it cannot be measured. Radiation from test fallout might be slightly harmful to humans. It might be slightly beneficial. It might have no effect at all." I mean, what incredible denial from somebody at his level of height in the system.
No, he was at the top at this time.
He was it, yeah.
And
the father of the H-bomb, following the previous bombs, the early bombs.
So all Lifton's studies, studying including the victims of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and the military that experienced the testing of the bombs, and other things, lays out all the different ways this is happening.
Yeah. You've also come out strongly and seen the connections with nuclear power, tell us some more. Well, your statement for the court also addressed nuclear power, and you mentioned the 1986 disaster at Chernobyl in the Soviet Union, and then also the 2011 disaster at Fukushima, Japan. Tell us more about this.
Well, we have to go to Teller's statement about radiation. And let's, Chernobyl and Fukushima were major disasters. And I talk about low-level radiation. At Sellafield along the English coast, I went to Sellafield display, like a tourist center, and they said, well, low-level radiation is not dangerous. It's in the atmosphere anyway, so don't worry about it. But it's not true. And I have a quote in this book, and this is a different quote regarding comparing weapons. I'll come back to that. But after the Mother's Day action 2 years ago, a man heard about me and called me up, and he's promoting this book, Chernobyl, Consequences of the Catastrophe for People and the Environment. This book here contains the documentation of what happened at Chernobyl in terms of the effects on people, and it went across the whole northern hemisphere, but the documentation in here is what happened to the people in those countries of the Soviet Union in the months and years after that. And so this book is very prominent to say nuclear radiation is affecting people, causing all kinds of illnesses and death. And this quote here compares nuclear radiation from nuclear power in Chernobyl atmosphere and with nuclear weapons that were used. And it says over 1 million people have died due to Chernobyl's meltdown. That number grows with time. Here is a quote. For the past 23 years, it has been clear that there is a danger greater than nuclear weapons concealed with nuclear power. Estimates from this one reactor exceeded 100-fold the radioactive contamination of the bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. No citizen of any country can be assured that he or she can be protected from radioactive contamination. One nuclear reactor can pollute half the globe. Chernobyl fallout covered the entire northern hemisphere. So you get the impression over 1 million people, and what's the end of that?
Yeah.
Well, Fukushima is much worse. In terms of cesium-87, it's 85 times greater, estimated, released in Fukushima than was in Chernobyl. So the effects of Fukushima is much greater.
Yeah.
And we need to talk about that. It's
Right.
killing people now. There's a study that says 14,000 people in the United States died over first 17 months, I believe it is.
And the official statements from the utility there that owns that plant
TAPCO.
and the government and everybody else, oh, not to worry, not to worry, not to worry. You know, it's like, people have to know that we're being lied to.
Well, the government does lie, and it starts right at the beginning when they up the level of safe radiation from 1 to 20.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
those kinds of things. And just in December, not long after the trial, the Ronald Reagan sailors, 50 of them, sued
the ship
TAPCO.
called Ronald Reagan, the U.S.
The U.S. ship
military
called Ronald
ship,
Reagan
yeah.
that was off the coast, 10 miles off
Yeah.
the coast, doing work to help the people
Yeah.
affected by
Yeah.
the Fukushima situation.
You have another book that is powerful coming out of the Rocky Flats.
Yeah.
Show us that one and tell us briefly about that.
Full body burden growing up in the nuclear shadow of Rocky Flats. Like we talked about earlier, I lived in Colorado for 5 years and started working with the action group concerned about what I call Rocky Flats Action Group. And this was a story begun by Kristen Iverson. She grew up in the area, and she was ignorant about Rocky Flats. She knew there was something going on over there. She rode her horses through the fields. She swam in the lake that was fed by the creek that came out of Rocky Flats. And like many of the people there, they were ignorant. But they learned over time what the effects are. And this book, for somebody interested in personal stories and a kind of a range of understandings and connections and so forth, and to a very sophisticated understanding of how they were affected by this radiation, and the cover-ups, the manipulations, and the sorry experiences of people that had friends and family that died as a result of this radiation. So it's a great book for a real human understanding as well as a scientific understanding of what goes on.
And we have an equivalent here with people who live downwind from the Hanford nuclear plant in eastern Washington. The Hanford downwinders have excessive likelihood of getting cancers and various kinds of things
Yeah.
that are directly caused by that. About 20 some years ago, we had a downwinder on the program, and we talked about that. The Washington Physicians for Social Responsibility has done a lot of good work on Hanford, and the public really does not want to hear about this. This is, and we'll talk about this denial in just a moment.
And it's not just downwinders, it's the radiation seeping into the
It gets into
Columbia
the
River.
Right.
And where's that going to end
Right.
up?
Let's talk about the denial, these common reactions. But let's just mention one other problem, which is the climate crisis that you and I and the Olympia Fellowship for Reconciliation and lots of people are working on. The statement that you had to the court addressed the climate crisis along with nuclear power and nuclear weapons, and so you see an urgency of concern, and the scientists
and
are
a real
pointing the way.
connection between them.
Yeah. So tell us.
So it's clear I've been involved with the nuclear issue for all these years, resisting nuclear weapons, thinking it was the greatest threat to humanity. And in recent years, I've become aware that the climate crisis is a serious issue. And in last year or two, my consciousness came to the point that I feel the effects of climate is more imminent and more possible than the use of nuclear weapons, although that could be proven wrong if humanity decides to use them, use nuclear weapons. So the reason for that is it's intangible, and we can only see the effects of the climate crisis through storms and droughts and weather changes, which is happening very rapidly. And the latest information out, the latest analysis by very knowledgeable scientists is we may not stop it from getting to past 2 degrees centigrade, and 1 degree centigrade is more than we want it to get past because of the effects. And it's at 0.8 degrees centigrade above the baseline norm. So I think now that there's little hope that we're going to stop it from going beyond, and maybe far beyond 2 degrees centigrade.
Yeah, the processes that are underway are cumulative, and the damage, the pollution of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere from burning fossil fuels, coal and oil and natural gas. It takes a number of years before the results come out, and so the climate changes that we're experiencing already now are from the time when we drove the car a few decades ago, or heated our house, or whatever, and the what we're burning now will make things worse years ahead. So we've got to stop this because we're already on that escalating curve.
That's right.
And so we got to stop it and reverse it. And the governments don't want to deal with it. Big business doesn't want to deal with it. Ordinary people are either not informed or trying to push it away.
Or just a few people are saying, there's more and more people every day saying no.
Right, and the Olympia Fellowship of Reconciliation has a very active confronting the climate crisis group, and we have information at our website, olympiafor.org, to get people connected, including references to lots of other things. One of the things that connects all of these is a lot of denial. And this is in your statement too, that folks are not wanting to deal with it, and as you said earlier in the interview, you're trying to find creative ways to lift the issues up so people can deal with it. Tell us about denial as a psychological defense against these hard realities.
Well, the work of Ernest Becker, and he's a multidisciplined cultural anthropologist, died in 1974 after got the Pulitzer Prize for denial of death.
Yeah, a classic book.
And he used these various sources and insights to say that what's the basic human motive? And denial of death. uh, and we're afraid to die. It's not so much our personal, it's for some people very personal, and the body dies, it's very upsetting, but we're creatures of meaning. And if we don't have a view of our life continuing in some way, there's no meaning. And so we need meaning, and meaning's found in many different ways. Our life's work, our children's, carrying on our heritage, religions. We develop an image in our mind that gives us continued meaning. And all of that is to deny the fact of death and ways for us coping. Lifton uses the word immortality a lot, just like Becker does, but he also uses continuity of life. And he does all this research showing how people have a healthy view of continuing life, or not, and death, or are just totally estranged by it. So when people are traumatized in some way or other, often they deny it, they push it down into their sub-psychology,
Right. Right.
and go on with life as usual without letting those thoughts come forward.
Right, because all of these things that we're talking about are very heavy. If somebody pushes the button to launch nuclear weapons, we could be dead in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Or just the seemingly inevitable rise of carbon pollution in the atmosphere it means that animal species could be extinct, that we might not get the crops in and people might starve and stuff, and it's not pleasant to think about that, so we push that away.
We feel
wanna
powerless
deny.
at times to
Right.
deal with
It's too big. It's
Yeah.
too big and we're so small.
Yeah.
We did a TV program on that very topic just recently, the April 2013 Olympia FR TV program that people can watch on their computer
last April.
is Consequences of Denying Hard Realities.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so April 2013, you can watch that on the TV programs part of olympiafor.org. But it causes real problems when we deny these things.
Well, I've been studying this for 20-some years,
Yeah.
trying to figure out why we are violent. That was a question that got me into it at
Yeah.
the start of the first Iraq War. So it takes time to really understand, and there's always new appreciation of those things.
Yeah. And I think we see evidence of this in various ways. For a number of years, I've thought that one of the reasons why people like to buy big pickup trucks or big SUVs is that we can tower over other people, even though we may feel powerless in our lives. The kids are out of control, and I don't have any power on my job, or things are going to hell in a handbasket, and my economy is getting worse in my own private life, and blah, 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 blah. But if I can buy a big pickup truck or a big SUV and tower over other people, I have some sense that I'm back in control of things.
Power is a big factor.
People do that, and you have the gun culture in this country. There's a bunch of ways that people act out because we can't confront these things in a realistic way.
Too much. We don't have the tools to do it with.
But in the American culture, you can buy something, and that'll make you feel powerful.
And that's how I connect climate and nuclear power and nuclear weapons, as well as other natural resources which are going, is it's the human mind creating images and things lead to this. And we've got a very competitive culture, and we think we're in the United States dominant of the world, and so that connects all this to me.
Your statement for the court asked the question, or well, it doesn't ask it as a question. It says, "My actions are meant to throw light to turn humanity away from self-suicide." So you see our trajectory as suicidal, and a quotation here says from your statement says, we humans are self-destructing and taking living creatures as we know and experience them along with us. And you say it's not just nuclear weapons, but it's other stuff as well. So, I mean, if humanity is committing suicide, and the forces that we look to for sanity and protection, governments or other big systems, aren't defending us. The institutional church has not taken a strong enough stand on this. Mass media aren't doing their job. Big corporations are complicit. Government is complicit. Who's going to protect us from suicide among humanity? I mean, this gets down to the gut level.
What does it mean to die?
Yeah, I mean, this is about the heaviest stuff you can get into.
What's going to happen?
So there's a numbing process that you've studied. Tell us about this numbing process.
Well,
or have we covered that?
We've covered it to a significant degree, but there's different understandings of shades of it or parts of it. We do it sometimes intentionally, especially leaders. Imagine our president dealing with all the killing that's going on through the United States actions around the world. He's probably in his heart of hearts wants to have justice and peace, but he's acquiescing to drones, to weaponry, to increasing the military, et cetera, because he's part of that. And so Lifton says the higher up you are, the more numbing you do. You must numb yourself to all that suffering and death that's caused.
Yeah. So part of what we need to do in the few minutes remaining in this program is helping us figure out how do we get out of this stuff. We've got, you've been connecting the dots really well, and we've got like nuclear power really is connected to nuclear weapons. So President Eisenhower came up with, quote, atoms for peace as the notion of saying let's have nuclear power as a way to justify the existence of the nuclear technology. But it was really nuclear weapons that were driving it. But they said, well, let's have nuclear power, and that way we can think of atoms in a peaceful way. So we got that connection. We got the excessive materialism in American lifestyle and our excessive use of oil and other natural resources, which means that we need to have a big military to go out and get these from other countries one way or another. And then we have the psychological connections that at some level sort of recognize this but don't let us recognize it. So we have to go into numbing and denial. I mean, there's a lot of things connected.
And here we come to the heart of the matter for people in the West especially. We developed a materialistic society, a society that can measure and create all this machinery, and we've lost touch with what it means to be a human being.
Right.
And so on the material level, we need to do everything we can to reduce the threats. And on the personal level, we need to come to grips with who we are as a human being, find our deep self, our self that's capable of living courageously, living with love, seeking the truth. These are Gandhi's ideas, these are other leaders' ideas. And so spiritual development, if you want to call it that, or just self-development, if you want to call it that, self-image. I mean, there's a whole new program that could be done just on this subject.
Yeah, the sort of something to leave behind as we move in a better way is leave behind what Dick Cheney had said near the beginning of the 2003 invasion of Iraq, which was the American lifestyle is not negotiable.
Right.
I mean, so we got to go get this war for oil rather than trim back a little bit on this excessive lifestyle. So we got to leave a lot of that stuff behind. And as individuals transcend, and as a society, as a culture, we need to transcend these. One of the things, I did some reading at the Ernest Becker Foundation website, which has a lot of good stuff on it, and we'll mention that again at the end in the closing credits. But one of the things I saw there was that to be, or maybe it was in when I read Denial of Death, but to be psychologically healthy, a person has to cultivate and maintain some self-esteem, and often the surrounding society makes it difficult for us to do that, and especially in groups that are not valued by society. And so what happens is when a person or a group is not valued by society, they become alienated. And when society devalues and alienates people, they often internalize that negativity, and then they respond by behaving in ways that end up hurting themselves
They're
as well as society. And the cycle continues. And nice society doesn't want to accept responsibility for what it's done, so we blame them even further. So you get these negative cycles down, and it would seem like that's one thing to do, is to work things back up again and be affirming and trying to reconcile the alienated portions of our society into
create a new society and give them
right.
everybody a part.
And because one of the things that a number of people have said is that we need something instead of war that gives us meaning. Chris Hedges wrote a book called War is a Force That Gives Us Meaning.
Right.
It's a powerful book,
Right. Right.
And we need a non-military, a non-violent project that would give us meaning, and one would be build a new society that includes everybody. That would occupy our attention.
Gandhi gave a vision of that with his nonviolent equivalent of war,
Yes.
which is what he developed in South Africa was Satyagraha.
Yeah. So that goes back a century from.
And there's been a lot of development of that since then.
One of the things that Ernest Becker had said in Escape from Evil, he said, "It is the disguise of panic that makes us live in ugliness and not the natural animal wallowing. This means that evil itself is now amenable to critical analysis and conceivably to the sway of reason." So, I mean, there's some powerful opportunities to radically rethink things, reality, humanity, what it means to be human, and how we build a society.
Right.
I mean, this
and I
gets
have
into
other
exciting.
teachers that go into that.
I mean, this becomes really exciting when you get these heavy books and heavy concepts that deal with these things that can be quite depressing. Is if you flip it around and say, how do we get out of this mess? And basically, it's the opposite of what we've been doing.
But it's there in many ways. And we mentioned Jesus in the parable of the Good Samaritan.
Yeah.
The Good Samaritan helped a Jew, which was like
the Samaritan was the other, the looked down upon foreigner, the other.
Right.
And that's the person that helped out when all the official people
all the
failed to
ethnic
help.
conflict stuff. So there's plenty out there.
Yeah. And a very helpful thing is Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tale about the emperor that had no clothes. I mean, when the little kid could recognize that this egocentric, vain emperor who had been deceived by the scam artists that were going to give him this great suit of clothes, the little kid could recognize that the emperor has no clothes. We need that kind of a fresh approach. We're rapidly running out of time. Can we come up with something? Is there a closing sense of things that you can offer before we wrap this up?
Well, all I can say is, for me, forming an alternative way of life as much as I can that abstracts from and pulls away from this American way of life that consumes more than the earth can provide, and does it in a just conflictive way of life. Way is the way I want to help us form a community. We have to learn to do it together. I do everything I can, but we need to learn to do it together and just live with the consequences.
Well, thanks. I want to thank Bernie. I want to thank all the folks who've been watching. Nuclear weapons, nuclear power, radiation, the climate crisis, all of these are very real problems. Ignoring them will not make them go away. The big problems of the real world are so huge and overwhelming that often people feel powerless to solve them. And then when we act with a psychological defense mechanism that simply shuts them out of our awareness, we deny those problems exist, and then we fail to be able to address those problems at all. Deep down subconsciously, we know those problems exist, and so the denial causes more problems, more stress. The powerful entities in our society, governments, giant corporations, the big mainstream media, also react by censoring the bold people who are trying to alert us to the dangers. The government clamps down on whistleblowers like Private Manning and Edward Snowden. Giant corporations clamp down on people who are acting boldly to protect us from the climate crisis and from nuclear weapons. Giant corporations also spend millions of dollars to defeat citizens' initiatives to protect consumers and the environment from the corporations' reckless behavior. When we work on these issues, let's also develop strategies and resources that empower people to solve the problems. This would free people from denial and immobilization so that all of us can become part of solving the problems. The Ground Zero Center for Nonviolent Action offers a lot of information and opportunities for action, and I encourage you to visit www.gzcenter.org. Also at Ground Zero's website, you can read the materials that Bernie wrote for the trial that we were talking about, and everything is posted at www.gzcenter.org. For insights into the denial of death, see information at the Ernest Becker Foundation's website, www.ernestbecker.org. And here in the greater Olympia area, many people are working to address the climate crisis. Contact the Olympia FOR's Confronting the Climate Crisis group at 360-352-6327. You can email the group at climate@olympiafor.org and also see the climate crisis page at www.olympiafor.org. You can get a lot of information from the Olympia Fellowship of Reconciliation on a variety of issues. Contact us at 360-491-9093, www.olympiafor.org. We are all one human family. We all share one planet. We can create a better world, but we all have to work at it. And the world needs what you have to offer. Thanks.